If you're new to Inkscape, then this video is for you. If you're an Inkscape user, there's still some nuggets in here that you'll find. I know I have a newfound appreciation for guidelines and snapping. Take a look at the timestamp links that I have below to see all the topics I cover. Let's see how easy it is to create this geometric artwork together. Now let's get to it. Okay, here we are inside Inkscape, and what you will see will be similar to what we have here. You'll get some kind of page presented to you, and before we started, I imported the sample art that we'll be creating, and here is my list of the basic items that I think everyone should master to be able to do any kind of project within Inkscape. And we'll cover these as we go through this project. I encourage you to follow along, and if you would like to import your own sample of this artwork, let me show you where it comes from. I use a resource called Vecteezy, and I'll put the link for that in the description. This is fantastic because it has a whole bunch of vector images that I can use in all kinds of projects, as well as other formats, as you can see on the left. So within the vectors category, I searched for geometric art. And in about the second page of results, you'll see here is the item that we're using today. You click on that, you come to this page where you are able to download the item. When you do that, you get a zip file. You can extract all the files within there. The first one you get is the actual vector file. .eps is one of the formats. There's the image you can use also. And then here's the licensing information. Note, the size that I've put here for this sample is 8.5 inches by 8.5 inches. If I wanted to resize this to anything else and keep the properties the same, I could lock the proportions and let's say make it 10 by 10. But I'll go back to 8.5 by 8.5 and we'll work with that. All right, so let's talk about the first couple of items here on my basics list. Let's look at the Inkscape version that I'm using Help, About. Down at the bottom, we see I'm using version 1.3, which is the most recent major version. If you don't have Inkscape yet, go to this website over here to download your own free copy. Note that I'm running Inkscape in the Windows environment, and I have a mouse which has a wheel on it, which will be important for the way I navigate. If you're on a Mac, your environment may be somewhat different. Now let's take a look at the document properties. I'm currently using a page that is US letter size, which is 8.5 by 11 inches. What I'd like to do is change this to 8.5 by 8.5 to match our sample size. You see now it changes to custom. By the way, there's a whole slew of different formats you can use. Also, I can modify some of the properties of this page. I would like it to be white. And the way I can do that is take this bottom slider, the L slider, move it all the way to the right. So you see in the bottom box here that you have all Fs. And we'll cover colors in a little more detail later. So now it's white. I don't need a border. I'll get rid of that. The other thing is display units. I prefer to have that set to pixels because that is the most granular that I can use. Okay, that's done, and now we can see the results of that. Now you don't have to draw just on the page here. You can also do things off to the side. And when I've been using Inkscape, I've generally been using the side canvas to do all my work. But for this project, the page becomes a central component of what we're doing, and you'll see that soon. All right, item 3, how do you navigate within Inkscape? If I hold the mouse wheel down and move around, I can move things, the whole canvas around like this. If I just turn the mouse wheel up and down, I can do this. And you may have noticed while I've been doing this, we have these slider bars at the bottom and on the sides that you can also use to navigate around. What if you want to zoom in and out? What you can do is hold down the Control key, roll the mouse wheel up, and roll it down to zoom in and out. You also have some tools at the very top of the toolbar here. Let's look at this one. Zoom page to fit in window. There you go. This one, zoom drawing. What I primarily will be doing is using the mouse wheel to zoom in and out and to move from side to side. Okay, now let's look at our sample artwork. You see it's made up of 5 squares by 5 squares, rows and columns. And inside we have various shapes, primarily squares and circles. We've got some triangles and this shape over here. So let's start off by looking at the Shapes tool. We have here a rectangle tool. What you can do is draw rectangles. If you want to draw a perfect square, hold down Control and Shift before you begin forming it. And then as you can see, it's a perfect square. Notice that we're using the tool every time we draw something new until we change to a different tool. So let's change to the next shape tool we have here, the ellipse. Draw one like this, like that. And if you do want a perfect circle, again, hold Control and Shift. And you have a perfect circle. Let's look at another tool we have here. I use this all the time. It is the Bezier Pen Tool. You can click to make nodes, keep clicking, and then you can join the last one to the first one, and you have a shape. Now, once you've drawn a shape with the Bezier Pen Tool, you can come over here to the Nodes tool, and you'll see the nodes that I drew, and you can modify them like this. What else you can do is if you hover near the edge, you'll see that 4-sided arrow. You can change shapes, change edges. Also, what you notice now, you get these little handles where you can change the curvature. With the Nodes tool, you can also add a node. So if I double click near the edge, I just added a node. You can delete a node. Let's say I select this one and hit delete on my keyboard. I've deleted a node. We'll be using the Nodes tool quite a bit. Now let's click on one of our rectangles with the Nodes tool, and you'll see it behaves a little bit differently here. Here I'm just resizing the rectangle, and this circular one lets me change the edges from square to round. If I do it on the circle, same sort of thing. This one lets you make a Pac-Man figure like that. Try to get it back to where it started. Let me show you something because I'm not sure I can get it back exactly where it started. I can use the Edit, Undo here to get it back and use it one more time to get it back to exactly where it started. Notice in the menu here, Edit, Undo has a hotkey, Control-Z. And then there's a Redo, Shift-Control-Z. But I use Control-Y for the redo. So let's take a look at this. Control-Y.
Control Z a couple of times. Now, how can you make this behave like the shape that we drew with the Bezier pen? Well, we can go to the selection tool here, and we can say path, object to path. Now it's not an object anymore, it's a path, which is what we drew with the Bezier pen. And if we look at the nodes tool, now it behaves like the shape did before. Okay? Very important to know. Same thing applies here. We can say path, object to path, and we get the same behavior as with the shape. Now let's talk about this selection tool a little bit more, because you'll be using this all the time, of course. When you select an item, and you see the four-headed arrow that you have, it means you can move the item around. When you select an item and you use the Shift key to select other items, you have multiple items selected, you can move the multiple items around. If you didn't want to select one of them, you could use the Shift key to deselect it, and then you still have the other two that you can move around. Another thing you can do with the selection tool, by the way, if you click on the canvas anywhere you deselect whatever is selected, you can draw a bounding box around the items you want to select. Let's say these two, and you can move them around. Now, when you're using this technique, if you don't fully select an item, like now I'm going to select 3, but not the 2 rectangles or the other ellipse, you can see how that works. Also, when you select an item, you see these double-headed arrows. This lets you resize the object from wherever you grab it. Now, if you want to resize it and keep the proportions the same, you hold down your Control key, grab anywhere. Doesn't matter which one you grab, the proportions will remain the same. Now, if you select an item a second time, you'll notice the arrows change. This allows you to rotate the item any way you want. Let me use Control Z to get it back to the way it was. If you hold down the Control key while you're rotating, you will rotate it in 15-degree increments. Each time you move it a little bit, it's 15 degrees. Control Z. One final thing about rotation, this mark in the middle of the object is the center of rotation. You can drag that anywhere you want. Let's say we'll put it down here. Now when you rotate, it changes the behavior of the center of rotation. And I'll Control Z to put it back to where it was. All right, let me move all of this off to the side here. And let's get ready to draw our artwork. Now to line things up, we're going to use guides. You see the ruler at the top, you can pull down a guide from the top like this. You can also pull one from the ruler on the left like this. And if you want a guide on a 45-degree angle, you can come up near the corner and pull one out like this. However, I would like to be more precise than that, so we're going to use this Extensions, Document, Guides Creator. You'll get a pop-up like this. And I want 5 by 5, 5 columns and 5 rows to be put on the page. So I can do a preview. That looks exactly what I want, and do Apply, and close the window. Now I also don't want to accidentally move one of these guides, because if I hover over it, I might accidentally move it. So there's a little padlock up here in the upper left corner, which allows me to toggle the guides from locked to unlocked. Now I've locked it. Look down at this message area down at the bottom, and I'll click this a couple of times. Now I've unlocked them. Now I've locked them. That's going to be very important because we certainly don't want those to move. Now the other thing we have to use is something called snapping. If you expand this triangle here, you will see the different snapping options that we can use. And what it means is Inkscape will kind of draw the object like a magnet to these different snapping items. So I can snap something to a guideline, a page border, an object rotation center, and all of these other options. If you want to set yours up the same way, feel free to do that. You can enable snapping with this checkbox, and that's the same thing as clicking on this snapping magnet here. Now it's enabled, now it's disabled. Let's enable this and show you how this works. See, it's snapping to the guidelines. Okay, let's make our first square. I'll start drawing from the left to the right. I think I'll do about 6 of these for you, and then we'll have most of the basics covered, and then I'll do it rest of it very quickly. So let's draw a square. Doesn't have to be perfect. It can be a rectangle here. We will now select it. We'll snap it into place. Now we can resize, and we can snap it into place like that. And zoom in a bit. Now the next thing we have to talk about is colors. What I'd like to make it is this teal color first. And there are several ways you can make things a different color. The easiest way is if you look down here at the bottom, you have all these color swatches. So I could make it yellow. Could make it a red. And you can scroll down through these swatches to see all the options that you're given. Okay, that doesn't allow you to be as precise as you would like to be. So let's go to something called the Fill and Stroke menu. Object, Fill and Stroke. You'll notice that it pops up here in the side window, which you can resize. And the settings I use are, I use the HSL, Hue, Saturation, and Light, and I use the color wheel. Now, in the slider bars here, you can change these, okay, and pick your primary color. And you can change the saturation. Notice how it's changing on the square over there. You can change the light component. And this bottom one is the alpha channel, which changes the opacity, which I hardly ever will change it this way. You can also control the color wheel up here. And you can change the saturation and lightness by moving around the dot in the middle. Now what I also frequently use is the RGBA code down here. This is the code for red, green, blue, and the alpha channel. And it's 2 digits per code. So, and each color goes from 00 to FF. It's a hexadecimal notation. So let's say I want pure red, that would be FF0000. Then I can hit enter. Let's say I want pure blue. 0000FF, enter. So if you look up a color and you get its RGB code, you can just type it right into this box here. Now, because I want to make this precisely the same color as our diagram, the last thing I can do here is use this eyedropper. So with my square selected, I use the eyedropper, and then I hover over the color I would like it to be. There you go. Now let's talk a little bit more about this. If I select the square, what we've been dealing with here is called the fill, the color that's filled in for your object. There's something called stroke, which is the outline of the object. Right now you can see it has no paint selected. If I select this, it turns the stroke into black. And the easiest way to change the color of the stroke is to use your swatches down here. Hold down the Shift key, pick a color, change the stroke. Now I'm going to keep it as black. The other thing you have to go with the stroke is its style. I have it set to about 8 pixels. Later on, I'm going to use a 1 pixel stroke, so I might as well just set that right now. However, we don't need a stroke on this particular square, so I'm going to use X to turn off the stroke. When I come back into fill, we have that set. All right, let's finish building this first square here. We have a couple of triangles, and let's use our Bezier pen. And this is where snapping will come in very handy. We can snap it to the corner. We can snap it to the midpoint. Snap it to the other corner, and then join it together. Now notice that it kept it as the same color that we were using before. I can go ahead and take my eyedropper and pick the new color. Very easy. Now, all I want to do here is duplicate this guy so we can make our purple triangle. I can use Edit, Duplicate. And notice the hotkey for that is Control D. Again, I can take my eyedropper and give it the new color. I can rotate this, and instead of doing it manually, we have a couple of tools up here. I can rotate it 90 degrees here, and I can snap it into place. There we go, we finished our first square. It wasn't very hard, was it? Also, let me demonstrate a concept called layering. Let's click on this triangle. You see these 4 arrows up here allow you to change the layer of this in relationship to the other items that it overlaps with. So I can move it down 1 layer, I can move it all the way to the bottom, and I can move it all the way back up to the top. Let me just make this one overlap a little bit here so we can demonstrate. Move it all the way to the top, move it down 1 layer, and move it down again, which is the same as all the way to the bottom. I'll move it all the way to the top and put it back into place. Okay, let's build our second square here. I'll take this full square that we built, Control D, and I'll slide it over into place. Change the color to, let's say, orange. Now we need a smaller square, so let me Control D this orange one again, change it to purple, and using the Control key, I'll resize it. And with snapping, it lets me resize it perfectly. Now we need to do this. What do we have here? We have 5 rectangles, all the same size. How can we do that to get it perfect? Well, we already have these guidelines drawn to do just that. So let's select what we've done so far, move it out of the way. Let's draw one of these rectangles, snap it into place. Let's make it the right color. So eyedropper, we'll make it this teal color here. Let's duplicate that, Control D, slide it over. Whoops, I'm still in the rectangle tool. Not good, Tom. Get rid of that. Control D, slide it over. Control D, slide it over. Control D, let's put it over here. Change it to the other color. Here we go. Control D, slide it over. Now what I'd like to do is group these all together. I don't have to, but let me just demonstrate. I can select all of these. And there's this tool right here, Group. And then next to it is Ungroup. So let's group these. Now I can move them all as one. So let's select these. They're not grouped together, but when I select them all, I can move them all together, as we've seen, put them back into place. Now this one I need to resize using the control. I'll make it really small, bring it up to where I need it. I need it to be even smaller. And let's bring it up here. Let me snap it into place in the upper right corner. Here we go. There we go. Second square is done. Let's work on the third one. I'll take this teal one and duplicate it. Slide it over. By the way, if you hold the control key down while you're moving something over sideways, it'll move straight across. Same thing if you're moving it up and down. Now we need half a circle. All right, how do we do that? Let's start by drawing a perfect circle. Draw it here, let's say. Let's make it the right color. It is already. Let's slide that into the center of this square. And let's use Control-Shift to expand it from the center point until it snaps into the entire square. Now we need a way to chop it in half. Let's drag it off here to the side. I'll introduce you to a path operation to do this. Let's make a rectangle, and I'll make it yellow. What I'd like to do is snap this into the center of our circle. And now I want to cover up the bottom half. All right, because as we all know, if you take a circle out into public, you should cover its bottom. Now, I'm going to select both of these objects and come up here to Path and use Difference. And if we hover over it, it's not telling me what it's doing, but let's just do it. We've chopped off the bottom part of the circle. Perfect. So now what I can do is rotate it 90 degrees, bring it back where we need it, and snap it into place. But obviously, it's not the top layer. Let's do that. And here we go. And now we need it facing the other direction, so I can use this flip to change that. Now I can simply duplicate this, slide it over here, flip it, change its color, and we're done. Okay, moving on. Let's duplicate this main square again, bring it over. And now we have something interesting to figure out here. What it looks like we can do is create a quarter circle and put it into each of these corners here. So let's take this half circle that we've got, duplicated, bring it off to the side, and use the same approach we just used. Draw a little rectangle, snap it to the rotation center, the midpoint, expand to cover up the circle, bottom part, select them both, and go into Path. Come on, Path, Difference. There we go. And the round part is on the inside. All right, so let's bring it over here. We're going to rotate till we have what we need. Actually, the square here should be orange. And the quarter circle should be this teal color. Let's duplicate, and then we'll flip them around as needed. Duplicating and snapping it into place. And now we can start flipping. There we go, look at that. And finally, let's do this one. So let's start with a purple square. Duplicate this again, bring it over, make it purple. Now, how do we draw this diagram here? I'll show you a little technique. First, what I want to do this, I want to give my own little guideline from the lower left to the upper right. So I'm going to draw with the Bezier Pen Tool a line. So you click it once and you double click and you have a line, but we can't really see it because we have to change the fill and stroke. We need to add stroke paint, and we'll get rid of the fill paint. And we want this to be, let me make it yellow. Let's say I'll hold down the Shift key and make it yellow. Now we have our line. What I can actually do is use this one that I drew. I can take the Nodes tool, snap it into the lower left corner and the upper right corner. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a triangle here, and then I'm going to bring in this corner of it until I have a curved edge like this. So let's go ahead and do that. Use my Bezier Pen Tool. Start here, go up here, down here, and close it off. Now it's just showing me the stroke, so let's go back and turn on the fill, turn off the stroke, and let me select it here. We don't see it, of course. Let's change the color. Let's change it to the actual color I need it to be. So on the fill, I'll use my eyedropper, and it's this color. Now, here's something we can do. So I've got this triangle selected. I'll use my Nodes tool. And this node, I want it to be curved. And you see these 4 tools up here. The second one allows you to make the selected node smooth. Now it's a curve. Let's make this yellow so we can see what's happening. What I want to do now is drag this along the line. See, I'm snapping it to the line here until I have the shape looking about as I would like. I'd say that looks good. Now I can change it back to color it needs to be. Use my selection tool. Now let me zoom in. I don't need this guideline anymore, so let me zoom in to select it and hit delete. There we go. Now to make the other half, I'll select this, Control D, and I'll flip it a couple of times, and there we go. You can see 2 pieces. I can snap it into place. Now I'd really like these 2 to be one piece. So let me select both of them, and you can go to Path, Combine. Now I've got one piece. Control Z to put it back into place. Now we're almost done. The last thing we need to do is have the bottom half of this square be this other goldish color. So what can we do here? Well, let's try this. Let's select everything here. And let's do, actually, before I do that, let me duplicate this shape that we just made. I'll turn it yellow, and you'll see why in a moment. Select, and let me just select the top yellow and the bottom square, and let's do Path Difference like we've done before. So now what we've done is cut out the difference. And what I'd like to do with this now is path break apart. Okay, so now I've broken these two apart. Let me Control Z on that. Let's select both of these and put them back into place. Now I can change the color of the bottom one to that. All right, we've completed our top line. Let's do one more square in detail, and then I'll finish up the drawing. Let's do this one in the middle because it's a little more complex. So let's copy a square, move it in place, change its color. All right, so what do we need here? We need a triangle on the bottom. So let's use our Bezier pen and snapping to draw that. And let's change that to the right color. Now we need these stripes. So how can we do that? Well, let's start by drawing a rectangle. And let's make it yellow because this is going to be temporary. And you see it's angled up at a 45-degree angle. All right, we can do that. So we double click here and rotate it 1, 2, 3 times. And let's move it into place here. Now this is where snapping can cause me some issues. So let me turn this off. And I want to resize this a little because it's too thick. All right, here's one. Let's duplicate it and make our second one. Duplicate it and make our third one. And let's position them where we want with snapping turned off. Not perfect, but let's go with this. Now with snapping turned on, what we can do is use our Bezier Pen Tool and draw these stripes using snapping. Let's go all the way to the edge. I'll have to fix that. Here's one. Let's change the color. I think it's orange. And let's use our nodes tool to fix this node. Snap it to the border here. And I can do the same thing for the other two stripes. I shouldn't have that little snafu like I had. Here's this one. And that one. Now we can get rid of these temporary yellow stripes. Select, delete, select, delete. All right, mine are a little thicker, but I won't worry about that right now. Great, if you followed along, you've gotten this far, that's great. Now I'm going to do the rest without talking over it, and I'm going to speed up the video. I'll turn on a little music, just sit back and relax and watch how this goes. And when we get to the end, I will cover a few more of the basics topics. If you'd like to jump to that, I've got timestamps in the description, and you can click on the timestamp you want to jump to. All right, here we go. Okay, not too bad. I hope you were able to follow along and do this yourself. Now let's do a couple of more basics here. Let's group this whole thing together. We'll put a bounding box around it and use grouping up here. Notice down at the bottom it says group of 130 objects in layer 1. Let's group it one more time. Now it says one object in layer 1, and we can move it all as one object. So let me Control Z to put it back to where it was. You can do the same thing with Ungroup. I can click it once and now it says 130 objects. It's still one. And I can ungroup again. Now they're all the individual objects. So I'll Control Z twice and now it's one object again. Now we're done with these guides, so let's get rid of those. We can go to File, Document Properties, and over here in the Guides tab, we can say Delete All Guides. Now, if you're happy with what you've done, let's get rid of all this extraneous stuff here. You'd like to export what you've built here. You can go to File, Export, and you get another tab here in your window on the side, and you have different things you can export. Right now we're selecting the page, and so whatever's on the page, if I move this, you'll see it's showing what's on the page. Control Z. You can export. If you're not sure what directory it's going to, click on the file folder here. Make sure it's the directory where your project is. You can export it into different formats. I'm going to do it as a picture. Export. Here is the picture I just exported. Looks very nice. Rather than export this as a PDF, what I would rather do is make myself a page, my own page, make it white, use the selection tool, use the sizes up here. This time I will use inches. Make it 8.5 times 11. Let's turn off this padlock, 11. And let's duplicate this drawing that we did and move it into the top of the page. This brings up another point I'd like to show you, how to align and distribute things. If I select both of these items, I can bring up the Align and Distribute menu. At the bottom of the Object menu is Align and Distribute. This opens another tab up over here, and we want to align, let me unclick them both. We want to align this drawing, and I'll click the page second, and I want to use last selected as my alignment criteria. I want to center it, and I want to move it up to the top. Now what I can do is combine both of these into one object. Now I can come back to my Export tab, and instead of exporting the page, I'm exporting the selection, and you can see it's got the white page 8.5 by 11, and this time let me export it as a PDF. Okay, let me bring that in. Here we go. There's your PDF. So if you wanted to take this PDF, put it on a flash drive, take it to your local copy shop. Mine has self-service copy machines where I can print things from a flash drive. And there you go, I can print out my artwork. One more thing with the Align and Distribute menu. If you want to align something to the page, for instance this, on the Align and Distribute I can say, instead of last selected, I can say page. Now I can center it to the page and center it on the horizontal. Okay, this has been fun. I hope you're able to do this yourself, get some satisfaction out of creating some nice artwork, and then use your own creativity to create your own.
Wow, that was a lot of fun. Now we're ready to graduate to something a little more complicated, like this mandala. Use the links here to see that in our next video and also to subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you then.